Thanks for inviting me to this Ask Me Anything conversation.
So we hope you're prepared for it, man.
No, of course no, and that's why it's going to be fun, right? So
exactly. We will start with something easy first. Yeah. Okay, we'll start with the easy ones first.
Also, I love the fact that when we talk about security stuff, we kind of go into philosophical issues, which are really my thing. So I really look forward to our conversation today.
Okay, we'll try and start off with some easy ones first, okay, bro? Maybe you guys, what you might want to tell the audience a little bit about what have you guys been up to for the last 1 year? Because I'm guessing for most people staying at home, their jobs have changed, the entire world has changed, nobody's flying anywhere anymore. And so what's new with with the bug bounty stuff, man? I mean, how have you guys been adapting to that, and how has it been?
Well, this is an interesting question because it's a mixed bag, The pandemic, on one hand, created a lot of issues, especially logistic issues. We couldn't travel, we couldn't meet in person, we couldn't see people, attend to events, sponsor events, and then go and, have a face-to-face relationship with people, which in our field is extremely important. But, and you know this better than anyone, because you organize one of the best events worldwide. But on the other hand, people adapted very quickly to the new work from home stuff, especially in our field, where basically that's what people do anyway. So I would say that apart from the pleasure of meeting people in person, that sometimes also helps to create stronger relationships. The business for us worked as usual. And honestly, I must say that we had more time. And therefore, we could focus on more things, and we did more things last year than in the previous year. So, as I said, it's a mixed bag. It's, as you said, the world has changed, and probably this change, at least to a certain degree, will be permanent. It's difficult to think that we will go back exactly to where we were 1.5 years ago. But for us, it was not such a big trauma, Not only that, but by freeing up time and resources, we could focus also on something new or something different. So we took the chance to, think better, because we were less in a hurry, less, jumping from here and there, from one plane to another, and so on. So for me, and this is of course just my personal experience of this tragedy, which is and was the pandemic. For me, in the end, it was a time for thinking better and to plan and to do more. So that's my.
I mean, when it comes to bug hunting, though, right? In the past, I would guess that you would go and physically see the bug hunter, right? As in, you would probably get some kind of face-to-face discussion with them, or how has that changed? We're talking about, kind of expensive code, right? They're worth quite a lot if you're talking about 0 days.
Yeah, absolutely. But since this was something that didn't happen only to us, but happened to everybody in the world at the same time. So psychologically speaking, at first everyone was taken off guard by this problem. And then with different speeds, people managed to find a compromise or a new approach to things. I must say that I think we were very quick to adapt, also because we are used to work with researchers through our platform, the so-called VRH, Vulnerability Research Hub. Therefore, of course, it's nicer sometimes to meet people in person, but some other times they don't even want to meet. So everything happens through the platform or through online channels anyway. So,
right. So in your case, I mean, with Crowdfense, it didn't really make much difference because you have the platform, right? So
sorry,
that makes
what I really miss is the possibility.
Discussions.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you. Can you say again?
Oh, no, I was saying that with Crowdfense, right? Like, so the fact that you guys have your vulnerability platform, that makes a big difference, right? Because all of the communications can take place through the platform, which is secure. So it didn't need to have a face-to-face.
So in my dreams, it's like that. In fact, it doesn't happen. Some people prefer to contact us through other means. So we receive, nuclear grade proposals for assets on WhatsApp. And this is, of course, wrong, or basically should be avoided. So in our vision, the VRH is safe enough so that even if at the beginning, at the early stages of a negotiation, the researcher can be anonymous, and this anonymity is strongly enforced by the platform. Then if we go into a deeper conversation and we find interested parties for acquiring that asset, then of course we will need to know each other better. If this happens through the platform, this happens in a relatively safe environment. And I'm saying relatively because, of course, nobody is 100% secure nowadays, but we think it has a good enough level of security, anonymity, encryption, and so on. When the contacts come from other channels, we try to bring them to the VRH, and sometimes we succeed, sometimes we don't. Of course, we cannot force people to talk with us only through the VRH. That would be wrong, because of course we respect everybody's needs and approaches to OPSEC and to security. But yes, having the platform for us is a big advantage. And especially during this past year and a half, basically we had the same number of submissions as the previous years. Now, this is super interesting. Wow. Because, if you go to Hack in the Box Amsterdam and you offer a super cool party and 500 people attend, and then they see, the logo, they see the brand, they see you, blah, blah. So maybe they would be attracted by working or collaborating with us, and maybe they will subscribe to the VRH and submit their research. This is how it worked before. Now, without being able to do these cool parties, unfortunately, or to be in person in these events, more or less we received the same number of submissions. Because of course, people they're working from home, researchers had a lot of time because they were in lockdown or they couldn't go out and so on. So I don't know. It's for us really. I understand that we are in a very niche, very vertical and small field, and that for the majority of others, the impact of this terrible health issue, global health issue, was very bad. In our case, we were already working from home. We were already working remotely. We were already using the best possible tools to connect and discuss and negotiate very sensitive things. So it wasn't such a big deal. Of course, everything has changed. I agree with you that this is a huge blow to the previous state of things, to the previous world, so to speak. The simple fact that now we are having this conversation on Zoom instead of having it face-to-face in a nice venue is also a consequence of that, right? But still, we want to do it. And so with enough resilience and, enough creativity, we can overcome anything, especially in our field.
We're hackers, right?
What do you think? I mean, for you, it was definitely a different story, right? But yes, I think that we managed to find, to adjust. And then we will see what happens in the next months. I'm confident that things will go back to normal, but the normal will be different from before.
And so, bro, just coming back to like talking about bugs, right, and bug hunting in general, right? I would say that things have kind of like evolved. Wouldn't you say that in the earlier days, right, it would be one guy could probably find a significant exploit, but maybe today that's no longer the case because there's so many defense mechanisms in place that one person can't fuzz everything under the sun, right?
Absolutely,
are you seeing that?
yes.
Are you guys starting to see
you see, what's happening is that this market is now differentiating depending on the class of target that we are talking about. So while before there were so-called low-hanging fruits everywhere, so you could find them in mobile devices, in desktop PCs, server computers, and also in networking gear everywhere. It was more or less the same level of insecurity. But now we have to deal with a world where certain classes of devices saw an impressive increase of their security in the past 2 years, 3 years. Because the vendors finally, and I say finally, even if apparently it's against my own interest, but if I look at the interest of society as a whole, if security increases is a good thing. So I always say that luckily now some classes of targets, at least some of them, are much more difficult to exploit successfully and in a meaningful way, in an actionable way. But other classes of targets are still lagging behind. And I'm talking about all that crap, IoT stuff, SCADA, a lot of small office, home office, networking gear, IP cameras. There's a universe of broken objects everywhere, and this is getting worse. So while a few classes of targets improve their security significantly, to a point where it's hard for a single researcher to find actionable exploits, bugs, and then to exploit them in an actionable way. I mean, we know there are a few geniuses out there, but they are the exception. They are not the normal. For the majority of people, it's becoming extremely complicated in terms of knowledge required, skills, time, resources, including financial resources, and so on. But on many other classes of targets, the situation is still, the security posture of these devices is still terrible. And so what we see is that the interest is shifting from those devices who are very, very difficult to hack and to exploit nowadays to the others, because in the end, from the point of view of an attacker, the attack surface is a very complex and huge surface that includes a lot of things. So if an attacker cannot get your phone, they will get your thermostat. They will get your Wi-Fi router. They will get your car. They will get your, internet-connected scale that will publish on Facebook your weight every day. And so we are really overwhelmed by the amount of crap that surrounds, in terms of digital crap that surrounds us.
So are you actually seeing an uptick in exploit writers focusing more onto embedded and IoT, and also buyers? As in, are there enough buyers to justify the researcher changing their focus? As in, like, instead of looking at mobile, like look at the embedded space or look at SCADA, because the number one, the exploit is going to live for much longer. So your window
I must give you
also longer, bigger?
an answer. I must give you an answer which has two parts. The first part is, since we don't deal on purpose with the development of cyber weapons, but we only deal with law enforcement and intelligence side of things. And when I say intelligence, I mean intelligence gathering, not sabotage, for example. So since we are not dealing with cyber weapons, most of this stuff that is being offered on the market nowadays, which relates to SCADA, IoT, and this kind of crappy products, is not in scope with our customers' needs. So we don't really look into that. I mean, we keep track of things, but we don't deal with those kind of things. But since IoT and networking and SCADA systems can have many different applications and many different shapes, and can also be part of an attack surface for an intelligence activity, sometimes there is not sometimes, there is a growing interest in some of these devices or classes of devices, because they can be used on the field to reach certain goals. So to answer your question, there is not enough demand, at least in our field, for IoT and SCADA research. But sometimes we have very interesting requests for very specific things. So even recently, we were dealing with some amazing research in this field, and we found some interest from the demand side, from the buyers. But generally speaking, I think this is something that will develop more and more in the next years. So this shift will happen in the next 2 or 3 years, when the mobile would be so difficult to exploit that it will become a liability, and therefore it will lose its attractiveness, its interest. So now we are like at the early stages of this shift. So, but if I understood correctly, your question is, the thing is, how can we support these researchers which are following their interests and researching things that are not so interesting or so in demand? Well, of course, they can do this as a bug bounty. They can refer and disclose these bugs to vendors, and they can go to events and they can get a prize for disclosing a nasty bug on an IoT device. There's so many things that they can do. If they have something that they consider interesting, they can still talk to us, and we will tell them very honestly, look, this is something that doesn't fit with our customer needs, or this is something that might be interesting, and then we can of course go deeper and see what is possible.
So let's just make a hypothetical situation. Okay, let's just say I'm the bug hunter, right? How much of the exploit do I need to disclose in order to get the discussion going? Because if I tell you too much, you could reproduce it, and that's always a fear, right? It's like, I don't want to tell you like too much detail. I give you like a
well, there are different approaches on the market. Someone is asking to see the code, period. And because of trust, or because they have a very powerful leverage on the researcher. So they will say, if you want to work with us, send us the code, and we will let you know. The way we are doing things is a little bit different. So basically, before we go into the analysis and testing of any code, we want to discuss the features, the coverage, the artifacts, the corner cases, the affected versions and subversions, the possible use cases, and so on, without having a complete description of the bug. Also because it's not in our interest to steal the bugs from researchers,
Sure.
It's not our, it would be bad in many ways. First of all, and this is obvious, this would be bad for our reputation, but it would also be bad because then we would need to put a lot of effort into weaponizing a bug, and that's not what we do. So it's not really useful for us. I'm not talking about the ethical side of things, but of course, this is I give it for granted. So we discuss up to a point where we can understand if going further in the negotiation is useful or not. Because many times, the submission is super cool, and you think, oh wow, this is a nice asset. And then when you go deeper, you discover that it only works on Friday, or it only works when you have a full moon, and because that's how it works. This is voodoo. This is really black magic stuff. So when you start to understand that there are too many exceptions or situations or problems from our point of view, this is already a no-go, because the application of this stuff is so sensitive that you cannot have low reliability or very small coverage or artifacts or any other issue. So as I also said in my ComSec track talk, where I show the funnel of our, let's say, the filter that we apply on all the submissions that we receive. And this slide shows that over 100 submissions, on average, 5 end up on the field. So it's an incredibly steep funnel. And we don't need to know about the details of the bug unless there is a clear decision to acquire that asset. And at that point, since we think that we are offering fair contracts, we offer usually, unless there is already a good relationship with the developer, we offer advance payment to see the code, and then we test it, and then if all the tests are successful, we will finalize the contract, and at that point there will be a certain way of paying, which depends on the negotiation. So in any case, when we reach this conclusion that this asset is extremely valuable and interesting and fits all our requirements, then at that point is basically almost done. So we can afford to give an advance payment to see the code, so that the researcher knows that we are committing ourselves to successful, to closing successfully the deal. And then we test, we discuss, we see if there are problems, and so on until we finish the test and approve. In such a case, then we sign, and everything then moves from there very smoothly. So people don't have to disclose their bugs. And for those researchers who are listening now, I advise you to not show your stuff to anyone. Because we see many times that maybe we receive the same submission from different sides, and the original researcher is just one of them. So be careful, guys. Don't show your stuff around. Don't brag about it with your friends and colleagues. Be careful, because if you have something valuable, you don't want to leak it. You don't want to lose control over it.
What about window of exploitability? So let's just say if I found a bug, like, do I have to guarantee that it's going to remain exploitable after you guys have done your evaluation? Because what happens if the vendor patches it? Do I still get paid, or tough luck?
Of course, but this is, of course. So during the tests, basically, let me use a metaphor, Dylan. It's like we are buying vegetables.
Okay.
Okay. But with fresh vegetables without having a fridge.
Okay.
So the lifespan of these things is by nature unpredictable and usually short. Okay. Then there are some ways that we apply to make them live longer. This is part of our, I would say, risk management and portfolio management activities. And in the end, it works. We can say that by using this way of doing things, we can extend the lifespan, the shelf life of these vegetables a little bit longer. Okay. But still, we are talking about something that is ephemeral by nature. So if it is patched while we are discussing and or testing, then in the worst case for us, the developer will have received the advance payment for seeing the code and testing it, and that's it. Okay. I mean, unless someone from the customer side is interested in an end-day version of the same. But of course, the price will change and many things will be different. The possibility to effectively deploy the asset on the field will be reduced, and so on. Also, it will be less stealth because it's an end day, so it is known, and therefore, for many reasons, that the fields of application of this asset will be dramatically reduced, and therefore also the value will be much less. But maybe it is still possible to close the deal. In many cases, it's not. I'll give you an example. Let's say we're talking about RCE for a major browser. If it's patched and that thing is updated automatically. After 1 week, it is completely useless. So in that case, there is no even the chance to use it as a name day. And therefore it's gone. But other things which have a long patching windows, or maybe the patch is released and people don't apply it for some reason. For those things, there is still hope, so to speak. Now, what happens if it is patched the day after we buy? Then we are screwed, basically. I mean, it's our business, right? These are the risks that we have to take. So if this happens, what can we do?
What can you do exactly?
There's nothing we can do. Of course, we will not. In this case, some people would scramble to sell it on, in the dark alleys to recover at least some money. But that's not what we do. We don't do that. So in that case, it's a loss. It's a loss. It's a loss for both sides, unfortunately. The researcher would have been paid for the advance payment that we pay for reviewing and testing the code, and we would have lost that. And we will not. But if we sign already, he will be paid, of course.
How often in the past has that happened? As in that, 1 day after you guys, or okay, maybe not 1 day, but a couple of days after you guys have acquired the...
No, it never happened.
The exploit?
Actually. Fortunately, it never happened like that. Maybe sometimes a very nice asset had a shorter life than what we expected. Maybe after 1 month, it was gone. Okay. But you have to consider one thing, that these government organizations which are deploying these assets integrated into platforms, usually, they're not usually fast enough. So a 1 month window would be extremely good if the asset would be deployed the next day. But honestly, this is not how it works. Maybe it will take them 2 weeks or 3 weeks to put it, to integrate and put it in the right condition to be deployed. Therefore, sometimes the window of practical usefulness of these things is reduced, because after we finish our part of the job, it's not finished. There's still some steps before it is used, and these take time. So basically, we try to move as fast as possible, also because of this inevitable situation where when something is ready, it still takes 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks before it can be deployed. So, but luckily, never happened like the next day. That would be really unfortunate. So until now, at least, it never happened. Some other times they get, but some other times they get never patched. So another thing that I showed in the ComSec talk is some statistics from our 2019 catalog. Of course, I cannot show the latest data, the latest numbers, but I can give, as an example, some statistics about our 2019 catalog. Okay, at the end of the year, of the 125 intelligence grade exploits that we dealt with during 2019, 93% were still 0 day.
Whoa.
Okay.
That's scary.
So we're basically saying that for one reason or another, most of these assets have a quite significant shelf life. And this is at the same time good and bad because it's good because the return on investment from the customer side is extremely high. And it's bad because these customers will not stockpile, or at least they don't do it anymore. They used to do it in the early days, but now they don't stockpile assets. So if they have one or two chains that work, they will not ask for more. It would be a waste of money. So again, this is also opportunity and a problem. But in the end, I'm convinced that to help to manage these assets properly, and by doing this, extending their shelf life as much as possible, is a good plus of our approach of our services. And of course, also the fact that we sell to very few selected customers. We don't sell to anyone. We don't sell to large numbers of customers, which also helps to, protect the investments made by our customers.
Would you say that of the customers that are purchasing these assets, right, are most of them using it for offensive capability, or are they trying to derive some defensive understanding from it as well?
Well, first of all,
you know what I mean? What they're using it for?
No, first of all, we have some idea of the field of application, but we don't know. So the vetting that we do is on the customer, is not on the activity that the customer will perform, because, of course, we are not in the position to know. But this said, sometimes we receive different types of requests. This is also very interesting, and this is also why I'm thinking that some kind of convergence between offensive and defensive activities is needed. So sometimes we receive as a request, we want to know if our tanks are vulnerable to this. Okay. Now I'm saying tanks, it's just an example. It's not maybe tanks, but to give you an idea. Or we want to know if our telco, or we want to know if. So in this case, the exploit is used to prepare countermeasures or mitigations. Again, we don't know exactly how and when, but this is certainly the idea behind certain purchases. In other cases, it is clearly for offensive purposes. Also, some things are offensive by nature. I mean, there is no way to use them for defensive purposes. So, yeah, but I would say that we have both types of requests depending on things that we can only imagine, that we don't know. But the fact that sometimes you can also find collisions, you can find the same bug twice. So sometimes what happens is that there is an attack, and they want to understand how it was done. And by researching the same class of bugs, we can give them some hints, or maybe find again the same bug that was already used against them. Because honestly, and I always say it, our visibility on this market is not 100%. So at this point, after 5 years, we are in a position to see a lot of what's going on, but not everything. So sometimes maybe someone has already found the same bug and exploited it, and we just don't know. Especially those teams that work exclusively for a certain customer, and you will never know what they have unless you find it in your networking logs, okay, or you find that it was used against you. So mostly the requests that we receive are for purely offensive stuff. And again, as I said previously, very focused on the information gathering and for law enforcement and for intelligence.
So, I think one of the questions that normally comes up when it comes to bug bounty programs is ethics and the trust side of things, right? So you guys know who your buyers are, but what's stopping them from reselling it?
Well, that's a very good question. And my answer is very simple. We don't work with integrators, which is a big loss in terms of potential business, but it's also the only way to make sure that our assets go exactly where we want them to go. You see, it would be much easier to sell to integrators. There are very interesting companies nowadays which are developing platforms and tools, and that could integrate our assets into their, let's call it armory, okay, or set of assets. But of course, we cannot force them to disclose who their customers are. And therefore, we cannot risk that for some reason, something that we developed or that we found and then maybe repackaged, fine-tuned, extended, and so on, because this is what we do basically. Also because, and I hope the researchers will not be offended, a very good researcher often is not also a very good programmer. So sometimes the exploits are super cool, but can be significantly improved from a programming point of view. So we invest a lot, and therefore we cannot risk that our assets go in places that we don't want them to go, or simply to not know where they go. Without any judgment, on the fact that these companies have customers from all over the world, and not all countries are giving the same level of assurance about how they will use these assets, for many reasons that we don't want to judge. It's just a matter of facts. So, yes, that's my answer. It's very simple. We know where these assets go because we don't deal with intermediaries, or we don't deal with integrators.
So from the risk management side of things, basically you guys have processes in place in order to make sure that there's some level of guarantee, I guess, to the exploit writer that that tool isn't going to fall into quote-unquote wrong hands. There's always that concern, right?
You see, this discussion, this topic about which are the right hands and the wrong hands is super complicated.
Yeah.
And really, we would need a couple of weekends to discuss about it. With a good bottle of wine, because it's really complicated. It's not so easy as many people think it is. So we need to remove as much as possible the risks of exposure or liabilities or incidents or or abuses to the maximum degree possible. Of course, if you are selling sidearms to the police, you sell them 50,000 Beretta pistols. And if there is one crazy policeman that is going to kill an innocent with that Beretta, how can you prevent it? So even if maybe the law enforcement agency overall behaves properly, follows the rules, and is abiding to the laws, you can still have individuals which create problems. And this is something that is unavoidable, I think. But this said, you can choose to sell to a certain law enforcement agency and not to another, your pistols. Now, I don't like to assimilate exploits to guns because this is simply not right. It's not a useful metaphor. Exploits are not the equivalent of guns in the cyberspace, blah, blah. This is crap. Exploits are pieces of software that do very specific things on very, very few specific targets for a very short time until they don't work anymore. So it's completely different from a gun. But going back to your question, the risk management is, I would say, 50% of our job. We are both doing very technical, weird things, and applying very strict risk management processes from a management and organizational point of view. Also because there are no good regulations in place. So imagine if you are shipping a can of a very toxic thing. There are so many laws, so many checks, and this shipment will be tracked because it's dangerous, toxic stuff. And there will be a certain way, which is a standard that must be applied to handle this can, to move it from here to there, and so on and so on. But for exploits, there's nothing like that. Nobody knows, actually, the dangerousness of what they're dealing with until an incident happens. And in
so
my
do you
opinion,
think that you're going to see governments actually take a proactive role in trying to manage this in some way so that everybody plays fairly?
So we found a lot of resistance in the market to find a new, better risk assessment standard. We tried, but we didn't receive good feedbacks from other players. Customers are interested, but many, at least until now, in the market are not interested into defining together a way to give a risk score to these things and handle them differently depending on what they are. So if you have something with and I'm not talking about the CVSS score, of course, because that is purely technical.
Yeah.
Okay. But you can have a 9 or a 10 for something that cannot have huge impacts at a society level, while something else with the same CVSS, could have dramatic impacts on society as a whole. So we are not there yet, but we really would like to move forward in this direction, because also for us as a company, imagine we are a small company And we are dealing with things that potentially can be extremely damaging. So we take all possible measures, and we really avoid to do a lot of deals because we don't want to generate unnecessary risks, or simply to create unpredictable situations where we don't know what's going to happen. That is enough for us to stop a deal. Many others are not following this kind of approach. And I understand it, because since there are no regulations, why should they bother, right? But in perspective, responsible, I don't want to use the word ethical, because I don't know. I know many people will, won't be happy if I try to say that this is an ethical approach, right, to offensive stuff. It's apparently a paradox. So let me just say that from risk management point of view, in order to make things happen smoothly, reduce liabilities, reduce unnecessary risks, and overall having this market work in a sustainable way, we should develop some sort of standard for attributing a risk score to different types and different classes of assets. The fact that we don't have this is dangerous.
How long do you think it will take before we see this becoming kind of commonplace, that everybody kind of agrees that we have a standardized way of describing it, or attributing a risk score to it?
Yeah. You see, the thing is, this risk score cannot be purely technical, because when we're talking about cyber stuff nowadays, we are talking about something that affects physical and human assets as much as, if not more, technical assets. So, for example, let's say you have a nice exploit for a wearable healthcare device. Now, from the point of view of research, this is super cool, right? But if this ends in the wrong hands, this can be used to kill people. Not just to take their emails from their phone. And by the way, also taking emails from the phone can be very dangerous, depending on the situation, right? So we need to define a multi-dimensional scoring system where the technical variables are together with potential impacts in terms of several things, and this should give us some sort of index so that we know what we are dealing with, and we can definitely improve the way we work if we know what are the risks of this stuff. Of course, we have our own internally developed risk assessment framework, because even if there is not a standard, we wanted to have this. So everything we deal with has a score. And I must say from our experience that the fact that we developed this helps us a lot in our activities and in taking decisions. Sometimes this will go against the business. This is inevitable. Like every time there is some kind of regulation or self-regulation, you will also lose something. But you will gain more by saving on mistakes, errors, consequences, liabilities, and so on. So that's our approach. And I hope it will slowly spread in this market, because this is something that we really miss as a community as a whole, to know more or less what we're talking about in terms of potential impacts and act accordingly. I would say even responsibly, if not ethically. Okay.
But yeah, I was going to say, like, why don't you guys take the lead? As in, like, since you already have the framework in place that you guys use internally, why not publish it? Publish it as an open doc that everybody can refer to, and then say that this is going to be, like, you know,
yes,
what
this is a great possibility. We have been thinking about it, and this is one possibility. But, you know, I would prefer to find some sort of preliminary agreement with some of the biggest players in this field, review this together, and then after this review, after this discussion and this fine-tuning, because I'm sure that our framework is not perfect, and then we could together share it with the rest of the community for further refinements and for further discussion. This is not something that, you know, because this in the end will be some sort of self-regulation. It has to be embraced. It cannot be enforced. So my hope is to find a critical mass of interested parties that want to work on this. And then after this preliminary work, we can share it for further discussion with the community as a whole and receive all the comments, receive all the ideas, and have in the end something that was really shared and therefore can be applied. So definitely this is something I want to work in the next months. And maybe you could also help us to do this.
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, I was just going to say, like, you know, if there's any way that you think we can play a small part in helping to make this discussion at least start, we'd be more than happy to. You know, I mean, I can think of Katie Masuris as one person that might have a lot of ideas on how this can be put into some kind of a framework that we can at least have a reference point to start off from. It's not going to be perfect, but we have to start somewhere.
This is just for having some kind of reference. Because the fact that we completely don't have that, considering the size of this market, the sensitivity of what we do, the applications of what we deal with, it's definitely needed. We can't wait anymore. I think it's about time to have this kind of reference, at least for taking informed decisions, because 0 days are definitely not born equal, and they will have different impacts, different effects, different applications, and potentially different adverse effects.
Excellent, man. Excellent. I think we're out of time, brother. We have already just gone past an hour, but
yeah, I know, but we can go on for another 6 hours probably without any problem.
This topic is so interesting because
fine. So yes, I hope I answered. I tried to answer in the most open and transparent way as possible, and I really thank you for these questions and for this opportunity to discuss things that are usually not discussed openly, which is a pity.
Yeah.
I understand the need for confidentiality, and of course, those are required in our field, but to discuss about the field shouldn't be taboo as it is. The conversations should be open, and a wider audience should also contribute. Which is something that we're trying to do, right? So hopefully this is just a little step towards that direction.
Well, let's plan for this, bro. Let's plan for maybe getting together towards later part of the year when things hopefully get a little bit better. And let's see who we can put onto a panel of some sort where we can at least start the discussion, right? Because like it's not like we're going to come up with a solution, but we have to start.
Yeah, look, we don't think we have the solutions. We think that we have the questions at this point.
Yeah.
We have some ideas, of course, also, but mostly we have questions, and we would like to find the answers.
Excellent. Thanks, brother. Always good to chat with you, and always good times to hear your thoughts as well, man.
It was a pleasure. Thanks, Dylan, and thanks everybody. See you hopefully in person soon. Bye.
We'll see you soon, brother. Take care, man.